The wind came first, the kind that scours cheeks raw and makes every sound smaller than it should be. It came down from the northern ridges and shook the shutters of a village that still hadn't decided whether it wanted to survive another winter. Out beyond the last fence posts, a woman bent to lift a cord of wood that had frozen together like a single stubborn stone. Her breath rose in jagged bursts. A scarf hid most of her face, but her hands told the truth. Red and scraped, a nail cracked to the quick, fresh blood bright as berries in the snow. They had called her wife not long ago. Now the village called her widow, and somewhere between those two names, people forgot how to be careful with their voices. She gathered the wood once, twice, the bundle slipping each time like a fish escaping the grip. A laugh cut the wind, then another. She tried again. Someone should help her. A girl murmured from a doorway. Someone should mind their chores, her father replied. The widow made one last effort. The rope cinching the wood snapped. The logs exploded across the road, skittering, spinning, knocking against door frames with hollow, accusing thuds. She straightened slowly, back aching. The laughter became a small avalanche, one voice starting and others joining. The relief of release, the audience enjoying its role. You could have asked for help. A boy smirked from atop a snowbank. She swallowed. Pride was a thin cloak, but it was all she had left. I did last week. You had chores. The week before you were tired. The week before that your mother said no. He shrugged like the lessons didn't belong to him. You should have married better. There's a certain tone that turns a crowd into a pack. It arrived then, quiet but decisive. People who might have looked away now looked closer, as if cruelty were a kind of warmth. Someone imitated her bent posture. Someone else mimed tears and slipped theatrically in the snow, sending a pocket of laughter up like sparks. The widow crouched without a sound, set one log back against another, tried to pull them together with the broken rope. The fibers were stiff with ice and would not knot. She tucked loose hair behind one ear with hands that trembled, not with rage. She had burned through that already. But the dull exhaustion fear leaves when it goes cold. The road was narrow. The village square yawned just beyond, a ring of wooden houses leaning toward one another like conspirators. In the center stood a stump with a crack wide enough for a child's hand. Once it had been a great tree, a landmark. Now it was a place to leave buckets and complaints. The wind curled around it and carried smells. Smoke, wet wool, something meat-like simmering somewhere. "Leave it," a woman's voice called. "It'll be dark soon." "She likes the dark," another voice said. "No one can see when she steals." The widow raised her head. "I have never stolen from you." "You stole from the snow," the woman said, and her friends crowed at the line. The widow pressed her lips together and reached for another log. The wood slipped again. The laughter rose. The wind lifted and tossed her scarf, and for a moment the village saw her face, older by grief, not by years. The sight hushed a few throats, but not enough to matter. Then the footsteps came, heavy, unhurried, the sanded rhythm of someone who carried his own weather. The crowd glanced up without meaning to, and the laughter decayed in the air. He was a large man. That was the first truth of him, obvious as the mountains themselves. His beard was winter thick, rimed with flakes that did not melt. Blue swirls marked his bare forearms, inked in patterns that seemed to move when the muscles bunched and smoothed. Over his back he wore a slab of metal shaped like a heart, edges ruined and dented by the world. It might once have been a door large enough to keep something important in or something dangerous out. Now it was a shield. The man squinted down the road, the way someone might examine a map for a path that wasn't there last time. His smile was not a plan. It was an invitation. "Good afternoon," he said, and the word "good" landed in the snow and stuck. No one answered. The cold made his breath into its own small cloud. He took the shield down from his back as one would take a cloak from one's shoulders, without fuss, a thing that had belonged to him for a long time. He set it beside him and crouched, enormous, to the widow's level. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the logs. The widow had seen him before, once or twice, passing through with the caravans, his laughter surprising goats into skittering. She had heard a dozen stories because the world was always starving for them, that he had freed a herd of mountain yak trapped behind a collapsed gate, that he had walked all night to carry a child to a distant healer, that he had lifted a house so its foundation could be set right. Stories grow in the telling. She didn't know which part of them to believe. He was close enough now that belief had a shape, a smell of leather and iron and snow. "You may," she said softly. He nodded. gathered 3 logs in one hand, 4 in the other, and put them into an orderly pile that stayed where it was told. He did it again, without show. The crowd watched as if they had been tricked into silence. "Thank you," the widow said. He looked at the broken rope at the frayed ends. A rope with nothing to hold is just a story about yesterday. He smiled, enjoying his own metaphor more than it deserved. Then he pulled a strap from his belt, double-wrapped the wood, and tested the knot with a tug. It did not give. "There," he said. "We will carry together." "We?" The boy on the snowbank scoffed. The big man turned. His eyes were not clever or hard. They were old, honest eyes that had seen a lot and decided to forgive most of it. "Yes," he said. "We." The boy looked away first. The man straightened, set the strap over one shoulder, and lifted the wood without the strain that made other men grunt. The widow moved to take the other side. He shook his head gently. "The wind will push you backward. Let it push me instead." They started toward her house. The crowd parted as crowds do, reluctant, offended by their own reluctance. Someone muttered something about strangers. The big man glanced up. "I am not a stranger," he said amiably. "I'm Braum." He said it as if he were introducing a friend they already knew. The name traveled through the village like heat from a hearth, and where it passed, a few jaws loosened, a few shoulders fell. The cruel ones stiffened instead, knowing instinctively that kindness had arrived and that kindness, properly applied, can be an indictment. A woman in a wool hat stepped forward. "She doesn't pay her debts," she said, chin up. "Her husband died on a hunt and left us all holding their share." The widow flinched. Braum paused. The strap creaked as the wood settled an inch. "What is owed?" he asked. 17 arrows, the woman said immediately. "Feathered clean, and 3 days of guard on the north trail, and 2 sacks of barley." The village wasn't wealthy. In poor places, people count precisely, because every bit of grain is a small promise that tomorrow will happen. The widow felt her cheeks burn. "I will pay," she said. "I keep saying I will." "And until then?" the woman sneered. "We are to carry her life for her?" Braum didn't bristle. He didn't even lean forward, though men like him often do that to make their size into a weapon. He simply looked at the woman's hat, at the way the wool had been mended with a looped, careful stitch. He nodded toward it. "That is good work," he said. "Blind stitch, you are patient." "What of it?" she snapped, wrong-footed. "Patience is heavy," he replied. "Let me carry some of it. There are turning points that arrive without drums." The village didn't know it yet, but that was one of them. Braum resumed walking. The widow's house lived at the road's thin end, where snow piled against the door and made leaving a question to consider carefully. The house leaned a little. The door stuck when humidity rose. Braum ducked to fit beneath the lintel. He set the wood down gently like a sleeping child. Inside, the hearth was cold and honest about it. He did not ask permission. He fetched tinder. He split kindling with one hand, and a knife that had seen more rope than flesh. He built the fire the way someone builds a friendship, with room for air to move through. When the first curl of smoke rose true and the flame took, the widow sat on the low stool and cried into her hands with quiet, stuttering restraint. Not because the fire lit, but because it had been so long since someone else had started it. Braum poured water from a jar into a battered pot and set it near the heat. "Soup," he declared, though the word had not yet earned itself. He turned to the widow. "What is your name?" "Anya," she said, wiping her nose with the back of her hand and thinking of the better cloth she had once used for that. "Anya," he repeated, trying the weight of it. "Anya, if you allow it, I would like to go back outside and ask your neighbors to lend you what they are owed." She blinked. "To lend what they are owed?" "Yes," he said. "Sometimes a debt is not a coin you give. Sometimes it is the chance to give it." It made no sense, and every kind of sense. She nodded because the nod came unbidden. Braum touched the edge of the shield where it leaned by the door. He lifted it again with the ease of a habit. Then he stepped back into the cold. The village had gathered as villages do when something interrupts the day. The boy was there, and the woman with the hat, and the man who had told his daughter to mind her chores. There were also faces that had tried not to be part of this and had failed. A baker with flour still at his wrist, an old man whose eyes ran, a girl who wore her mother's coat. Braum planted the shield in the snow with a thunk that traveled up through ankles and memories. The metal rang and settled. He stood behind it, not hiding. There was nothing to hide from, but standing as if the shield were a statement he would like to make in a language everyone already knew. He breathed. The wind worried at the edges of everything. 17 arrows, he said, 3 days of guard, 2 sacks of barley. No one answered. He nodded. It is good to be precise. He crossed his arms over the shield's heart. Anja owes the village these things. Yes? She does, the woman said, in the tone of someone daring the world to disagree. Then let us be a village. Braum replied gently. A village can be cruel, this we have seen, but it can also be a basket. When one piece breaks, the others hold more tightly. A scoff from the back. Pretty words. Braum smiled like he had been given a shovel and told there was earth to lift. Words are like tinder, useless until you do something with them. What do you want us to do? The boy asked sullenly. Braum looked at him, and the sullen expression that any winter can carve into a young face. I would like you to do something hard, he said. Hard things make us strong in the right places. He looked around. Who here can fletch an arrow? 3 hands lifted. Cautious at first, then steady. Good, Braum said. You will each teach the others to make 6. By evening, this village will have arrows to spare. If you have feathers, bring feathers. If you have resin, bring resin. If you have nothing but hands, bring hands. A man snorted. And the guard? Will you stand 3 nights for her? If that would help, I will stand 10. Braum replied without bravado. But I think it will help more if we stand together. Who knows that trail? Who can hear the difference between wind and footsteps there? Who can show the rest where to stand when the dark thinks it is clever? 2 hunters grunted. The sound men make when a thing might be worth their time. And barley, Braum continued, as if inventory were a prayer. Barley grows because many small things go right. It is a fussy grain. Perhaps we can be less fussy than barley. A few reluctant smiles folded at that. I have coin for 1 sack, he said, patting a pouch that looked more hopeful than heavy. I will buy it for Anya, and I ask the village to lend the second, not as charity, but as an investment that will return when her hands are warm enough to bake again. The woman in the hat narrowed her eyes. And if she doesn't return it? Braum nodded. Then I will. And if I am gone when the time comes, hold my promise anyway. It will bring me back. Promises are dangerous things to say in the open. They breed. One appeared now. The baker cleared his throat, flour dust puffing from his sleeves. I can spare some barley, he mumbled. Not a sack, but enough to start. I can watch north with the hunters, the father of the girl said grudgingly. For a night. I have feathers, the girl in her mother's coat said quickly, surprising herself with her boldness. Goose feathers. I will show how to glue the fletching, one of the fletchers added. The old man with the running eyes raised a hand that shook. I have nothing, he said miserably. You have stories, Braum said. Tell them while we work. Stories keep hands from quitting. The crowd shifted. The cruelty that had gathered had to find somewhere else to be. It seeped away like light when clouds decide, today, to be heavy. Braum bent, grabbed the shield, and lifted it back to his spine. He did not wear it like armor. He wore it like a promise that no one would get past him to the wrong person. They worked. It was awkward at first, as work is when people do not know how to share it. The Fletchers sat at a table dragged into the square, showing the boys and girls how to split feathers clean, how to set them evenly along the shaft, how to let resin cure without licking it because it tasted sweet but was not. The baker weighed grain. The hunters argued about wind currents like poets. The old man told a story about a winter so cold even lies froze on the tongue. People laughed and looked embarrassed that they were laughing, and then laughed at the embarrassment. Braum drifted through the work like a moon through tide, pulling people a little closer without them noticing. When the boy from the snowbank bungled a knot and swore, Braum leaned down. When a knot refuses, it is only asking you to be patient, he said. Here, see how it wants to bend? Help it bend there. Now pull. Good. What if it comes undone? The boy asked, the ordinary fear of failure dressed up as practical concern. Then you tie it again, Braum said simply. And again after that, if needed. Some things are improved by repetition. By the time evening bit the edges of the roofs, a rack of new arrows stood like a small forest in the square. A schedule for the North Trail had appeared in chalk on a board, names threaded together on nights that wouldn't feel as long as they might have. 2 sacks of barley waited by Anya's door, and within that door, a soup that might not have impressed a city had made the house smell like the possibility of tomorrow. Braum stood with Anya just outside, the light from the hearth making the snow near their boots into something almost golden. The village had not become kind in a day. People would still mutter, old debts do not vanish. They change shape, but the air had shifted. If mockery tried to inflate itself again, it would find, standing in the way, the memory of a man anchoring a shield, and saying very little until others decided to say something better. Anya spoke first. They were right, you know, about the arrows, the guard, the grain. Sometimes people are right and still wrong, Braum said. The trick is to fix which is which. She almost laughed. I kept thinking I should be stronger. You are, he said. Strength is not the loud thing. It is the thing that persists. They watched a moment. The girl in her mother's coat walked past, goose feathers tucked into a pocket, her chin set in a way that said she had found a new idea about herself. The boy with the knot ran after her and didn't pretend he wasn't doing that. The woman in the hat nodded to Anya as one craftswoman to another. The nod landed and stayed. You could have shamed them, Anya said quietly. You could have shouted, thrown your size around. Braum shook his head. Shame is a poor builder. It makes only cages. A gust came hard, lifting powder so it moved like a white river at their knees. The shield hummed faintly against his back, the sound metal makes when it is ready to earn its keep. Anya tucked her scarf closer. Will you stay? She asked, then caught herself. I mean, there's not much room and I will stay tonight, Braum said. The North Trail begins at your door. It seems important to begin well. He stood the first hours with the hunters. He didn't speak unless spoken to. It was their trail, and men who know their own edges deserve to lead within them. He learned where the snow tends to drift deceptively flat, hiding a ditch that can break an ankle. He learned which dark wedge on the horizon meant weather, and which meant nothing. He learned which fox prints belonged to the old bold one, and which to her new careful mate. He learned the sound the village makes when it sleeps, different from other places, as individual as a heartbeat. Near midnight, the boy found him again, hatless, cheeks raw. He had come to relieve his father an hour early because his father's back hurt when the air fell below a certain kind of cold, and the boy wanted to prove he was not only the kind of boy who sat on snowbanks and watched other people try. Braum gave him his place, stood at his shoulder for the first minutes, then nodded and walked back toward the square where the fire had become coals and conversation had become listening. He found Anya awake, the soup pot empty, the house tidy with that practical dignity only people with little can manage. He sat just inside the door and leaned the shield against the jamb. He slept poorly. Big men often do in little rooms, but he slept enough to greet morning without resentment. When dawn came, it came in layers. Pale gray first, then thin gold along the eaves, then the sudden crispness when shadows remembered themselves. Braum went out and stretched the kind of stretch that makes a small sound in the spine and a large one in the mind. The village creaked to life around him. A cartwheel complained. A dog considered a bark and saved it for later. The smell of fresh bread arrived early because the baker had decided to show off. Anya stepped out, shawl around her shoulders, hair braided as if to keep thoughts in order. I don't know how to thank you, she said simply. Braum's smile warmed before his words did. You already did. Last night when you let other people help, that is the hardest thanks. She looked down at the snow, at the shadow of the shield against it, a dark heart with soft edges. She nodded. People will forget, she said. Maybe not today, but soon. Then we will remind them, Braum replied. Gently if we can, firmly if we must. Anya's mouth curved. You make it sound easy. It is not, he admitted cheerfully. That is why it is worth doing. They spent the morning making deliveries, arrows to those who would store them, grain to the bakery where it would become something better than itself, a few pieces of wood to a widow even older than Anya, who had said nothing during any of this because for her, silence had become its own shelter. Braum lifted what needed lifting, but he did not hurry. He listened to the way people said hello. He watched how their shoulders moved when they were not looking. He understood that protection is a long game, and that some shields must be held up day after day, sometimes by different hands. By midday, he knew he would leave soon. Men like him leave. They have to, because there are other squares where laughter tips the wrong way. But he also knew he would return. Promises, after all, bring a man back. Before he did, the village asked for something without quite asking. The old man with the running eyes put a hand on the shield's edge and said, "Let us see it." Braum tilted it forward. Children gathered, the way iron filings ring a magnet. The metal was scarred, yes, but the scars looked like history, not failure. The heart shape was softened by time but intact. The runes along the border deep and worn. The big man ran a thumb along a dent. This saved me from a falling beam once, he said, amused at the memory. This scratch here is from a yak that disagreed with me. We later agreed. He tapped another mark. "This one is from a day I was wrong. I keep it to remember." The woman in the hat looked up. "Wrong about what?" "About how fast people can change," Braum said softly. "Sometimes the heart breaks slow. Sometimes it breaks fast. Either way, a shield can catch the pieces." Anja stood just behind him. She looked at the crowd and saw something different now than the faces that had mocked her in the morning. She saw the same people, yes, but rearranged inside themselves. A handful of them would revert when convenience called. A handful would hold firm. Most would twist back and forth like rope under tension, which is to say, like people. That was the truth of it. It wasn't a story about a hero fixing a place. It was a story about a place practicing being better, with a man standing nearby reminding them of the steps. Braum turned the shield and slid it up onto his back. The motion had the grace of long practice. He tightened a strap, rolled his shoulders and looked around as if to memorize the angles of the roofs and the way this square hugged its stump. "I will come again," he said, "if only to see if the arrows fly straight." "They will," the boy promised and meant it. "And if they don't," the baker added, surprising himself with humor he did not normally grant the morning, "we will tie the fletching again." Braum laughed, a warm, big sound that made the cold reconsider its commitment. Then he looked at Anja and the firelight that was now inside her even as she stood outside its reach. "Fear breaks," he said, not loudly, not for effect. "It breaks on things that do not. Your door will hold. Your back will hold. When it is too much for a while, ask. Let others be the thing that does not break." Anja nodded, a solemn, steady motion, like a vow made to someone who would keep it safe. "And you?" she asked. "What does fear break on for you?" He touched the shield once, gently. "This helps," he said. "But it isn't the only thing. Sometimes it breaks on a word said at the right time. Sometimes on a bowl of soup. Sometimes on a person who decides to stand, even when standing makes no sense." He stepped backward, then turned, big boots finding the track out toward the ridges. People watched him go because watching departure is part of what keeps us honest about what we want. He lifted a hand once, twice, the gesture casual and final. The wind rose again, playful now. The village breathed. A girl practiced drawing a bow without an arrow, testing the motion like a dance. The boy with the knot took a turn at the north trail, even though it was daylight. The woman with the hat carried a loaf to Anja without inventing a reason. The old man told one more story and did not apologize for it. Anja stood a while longer, then went inside. She fed the fire. She set water to boil. She unwound the strap Braum had left. She thought of 17 arrows and 3 nights and 2 sacks and how heavy patience is. And she smiled because, for the first time in a long time, she felt equal to the weight. They would talk about the day, later, the way people do, with too much certainty about who said what first and not enough about who listened. Some would say the village changed because a giant with a heart-shaped shield told it to. Others would say it changed because a woman kept standing long enough for help to realize where to go. The truth would be a braid of both. What mattered was this. When laughter tried to turn cruel again, it found in its path a memory. A man planting a shield in the snow. A crowd forgetting how to mock. A silence that was not empty but full of room, full of breath. Fear came fast, as it always does. And then it broke, as it can, on things meant to hold. And the village, stubborn in its habits like any village, did not become a storybook overnight. It did something harder. It practiced. It practiced in small ways and then in bigger ones, failing and trying again, until the practice itself began to change the shape of its days. Weeks later, a different caravan passed along the ridge road. A child pointed to the distance and said, "There, that village, the one with the arrows." "What about it?" the driver asked, half listening. "They say a widow lives there," the child said matter-of-factly, as if all towns should be described by the way they hold their most vulnerable. "They say someone stood in front of her until the village remembered what it was for." The driver nodded, eyes on the ruts and the weather, while his heart made a quiet place for the tale to sit. "Good," he said. "We need stories like that." They rolled on. Behind them, beyond the rise, the square settled into its afternoon. Work moved. Children shouted. Someone's laughter lifted and then softened, a sound made gentler by the memory of a big man's even voice. Farther along, where the land tilted into miles, Braum walked. He carried the shield not like a burden but like a tool waiting for its next job. He followed the path where it led, toward whatever small place had forgotten itself, ready to remind it without scolding, to stand without quarreling, to plant iron in the snow and let silence do the rest.